Good afternoon, students. Hope you are preparing well for your third paper, where the first part is Aristotle, the Poetics. The time period of Aristotle, 384 BC to 322 BC. A disciple of Plato, and to Indians, he is also known as the tutor of Alexander the Great. He has written a number of works, but the two works which are extant are Poetics and Rhetoric. Poetics means the art of poetry. It is a treatise of about 50 pages and it consists of 26 small chapters. Okay, the first 4 chapters and the 25th chapter devoted to poetry, the 5th chapter devoted to comedy, epic and tragedy, and the following 14 chapters are exclusively devoted to tragedy. So here you can realize the importance of tragedy in poetics. Most of the time tragedy has been discussed, as 14 chapters are exclusively meant for tragedy. Now the poetic starts with defining what is a poet. Now poet, according to Aristotle, is an imitator, just like a painter is or any other artist is, the one who imitates. Okay. Now what is the function of poetry? The function of poetry is pleasure. Okay, here we are talking from the point of view what Aristotle thought about. Okay, now pleasure as the end of poetry. Pleasure to whom? Pleasure to both the poet and to the reader. This is the function of poetry. Poetry makes an immediate appeal to the emotions. Which emotions? It arouses the emotions of pity and fear. Okay, pity for what? Pity, undeserved suffering, pity at the undeserved sufferings of the hero, tragic hero, and fear of the worst that may befall him. These emotions are aroused with their view to the purgation. Purgation means catharsis of emotions, means the emotions spent away. Okay, these terms you have to remember while answering objectives. Poetry being an imitative art, as I've told you, it's an imitation. It can imitate two kinds of actions. What? The noble actions of good men or the mean actions of bad men. Okay, if noble actions are imitated, what do we get? Epic. And if the later, like the mean actions of bad men, then we get a satire. Similarly, the tragedy. If the graver spirits imitated the noble actions, we have tragedy, means the actions of good men somewhere are imitated there. If the trivial sort of actions are imitated, then we do get comedy. Now, what is the definition of tragedy given by Aristotle? It will be like, it's Aristotle, tragedy is an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of certain magnitude. Okay, it's a lengthy definition, but if it comes in exam, it is an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of certain magnitude. Now the 6 constituent parts in tragedy: plot, character and thought, diction and song, and spectacle. Chronologically arrange किए हैं. सबसे important plot. After that character, then thought, then diction, then song, and then spectacle. The plot, what is the plot? It is the soul of tragedy, Aristotle says. It should have a unity of action, it should have unity of time, it should have unity of place. Okay, remember this. The plot, then it can be simple, a plot can be complex. Okay, the other terms that you have to pay attention on are peripety, means reversal of the situation, anagnorisis, recognition or discovery. Okay, these are a few terms which you have to be clear in your mind. Read more about Aristotle and the poetics. What is poetics? Art of poetry. Thank you. A little bit about Cassius Longinus in your course. The work is On the Sublime. Now, On the Sublime, it is written in Greek. Okay, and what is the central argument in this treatise of On the Sublime is what constitutes sublimity in literature. लिटरेचर में सब्लिमिटी कैसे आती है और उसके क्या क्या कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट्स हैं. Clear? Earlier we have studied कि function of literature क्या है. Number 1, it is to give delight or pleasure. Number 2, it is to instruct. Clear? Or to persuade. Clear? But Cassius Longinus added one more character, one more quality to it. And what is that quality? It is sublimity. He says any work of art is great. Clear? Not because it delights or means it gives pleasure or it gives instruction, but because it has the quality of sublimity. Clear? So the effect of any good passage is not to convince a reader or to give pleasure, but to transport him out of himself. The word transport, what does it mean? That the capacity to move the reader to ecstasy, okay, caused by the magic of the speech. Now he says that this sublimity is very important for any author, for any work of art to become famous, known, or a masterpiece. This sublimity was there in the Greek classical literature, which transported a person and which has the capacity to move the reader to ecstasy, to the feeling of ecstasy. So Cassius Longinus basically talked about this sublimity in his treatise on the sublime. Now you have to remember the 5 principal sources of sublime given by Longinus. What are those? Number 1, grandeur of thought. Number 2, capacity for strong emotion. Number 3, appropriate use of figures. Number 4, nobility of diction. And number 5, the dignity of composition. This I will explain one by one, but you have to remember these are the 5 principal sources of the sublime given by Longinus. Clear? And he talks about sublimity, the quality of any work of art to transport a person out of himself and gives a feeling of ecstasy. Thank you. A little bit about Horace, 65 BC to 8 BC, the time period. And he was a Roman classicist. And we are going to talk about the art of poetry, his work. Horace lived in the glorious Augustan age, named after Octavian Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. His works include 2 books of satires, 4 books of odes, and 3 books of epistles. The last of which, the Epistle to the Pissos, is generally called the Ars Poetica or the Art of Poetry. Now, what is epistle? Epistle is a letter written in verse, not in prose. It is a letter written in verse. So the art of poetry by Horace is also called Ars Poetica, and it is in the form of an epistle, which is a kind of letter written in verse. What is there in this letter? It is not as long as the Poetics. It's very short treatise offering advice on literary matters to a father and 2 sons. Okay, and the main topic of discussion in Ars Poetica is about poetry, poetic style, and a little bit about drama. Now, as we know that according to Aristotle, what is the nature of poetry? It is an imitation of life. But for Horace, it is true that it is an imitation of life, but he says that this is not the whole nature of poetry. For a poet often uses fiction and mingles facts with the fiction or fancy. I mean, putting in something on his own means it is not only an imitation, but the author can add on something new from his side in poetry. What is the function of poetry according to Horace? Not only pleasure giving, but also morally improving. It should not only delight but instruct. It should be utilitarian. It should be more serviceable to the society and the mankind. Clear? About the subject matter of poetry. He says that the subject that has to be chosen for a poetry should be based on simple themes which are familiar, which can be from life, from customs, but it should be familiar to the audience. Now, one very important point which he talks about in this work is that the place of genius and art in the success of poem. For this you have to understand what is genius and what does he means to say about art. By genius, he simply means the natural endowment of an author or a person. Okay, it is also called the nature. And by the letter means the art. He means the training in the literary art. So this is no doubt the very truth about any great work of art, be it poetry, be it painting, music, sculpture, or any other art. Two things are very important. The one is the genius of a person or the natural endowment or the natural gift of that person, and the other point is the hard work, or you can say the training, okay, in that art. Clear? So no one can be a great artist unless he is naturally gifted and unless he undertakes the necessary hard work or the toil to learn the principles of that craft or that art. Now, Aristotle, just like Aristotle, Horace is also concerned more with the toil, with the hard work, than with the natural inspiration or the genius. Okay? Is it clear? He is more concerned with the toil or the hard work to attain craftsmanship in any work of art than with the natural gifts or natural endowments that are there in a person. Now we come to drama. What does he say about drama? What does Horace say about drama? About the plot, he says, there are three important things, the important heads that he has made to know. Number one is plot, characterization, and style. Okay? Plot should be borrowed from familiar material, preferably the known Greek legends in which the story is being already known to the audience and the author could distinguish himself by originality of treatment. The events that are difficult to believe, for example, like you see, if a mother murdering her child or a human being is changing into an animal, this should not be shown on the stage. It should be reported, okay, rather than shown on the stage, because what is heard is less shocking than what is actually seen on the stage. So they should be reported and not shown on the stage. The other thing which he says is he demands truth of life in character. Okay, how? Like a child in a play should behave like a child, a young man like a young man, an old man like an old man. There should be a truthful depiction of the character in a drama or play. Lastly, he says that the dramatic speech, the speech that the characters speak, should suit the character. A poor man should have a speech like a poor man. If a person is rich, his speech should be like that. A god will speak differently from a mortal human being, or a man should speak differently from a woman. Okay, so the dramatic speech should suit the character, the age, the sex, the circumstances of the character. Okay. Now we can find